The whole idea of dating, going to dinner, meeting a stranger on purpose, is younger than the light bulb. Tonight, two strangers will swipe and decide to meet. It feels timeless. It isn't. For thousands of years before this, nobody dated at all, barely a century old. For everyone before that, there was no such thing. So how did your great-great-grandparents fall in love, and everyone for thousands of years before them? The answer is stranger and warmer than you'd think, because for most of history, love was the last reason anyone got married. Picture a wedding 300 years ago. The two people marrying barely know each other, and that is normal. For most of human history, marriage wasn't about romance. It was about survival. It was an alliance of land, of labor, of two families deciding to bet on each other. Who would inherit the farm? Who would feed the children? Who could you trust through a hard winter? Love wasn't forbidden. Poets had sung of longing for thousands of years, but, and historians stress this, love was rarely the reason you married. In fact, marrying for love was often seen as foolish, even dangerous. Passion fades, they warned. Land does not. So the families chose. Imagine it. You spend years quietly in love with the baker's son, and then you're handed to a man you've met twice because his family owns the next field. That wasn't a tragedy. That was Tuesday, across the world, for kings and for peasants alike. The arranged match was simply how it was done. So if the parents chose, how did they actually find the right person? They turned to the original algorithm, a human one. In countless cultures, there was a person whose entire job was knowing who should marry whom. Among Jewish communities, the shadchan. In villages everywhere, the aunties and mothers who held an entire database in their heads. This family's land, that one's health, whose son was kind, whose daughter was clever. They optimized for status, for property, for compatibility. The things a young heart in love tends to ignore. A good match could lift a whole family. A bad one could ruin it. So this was serious work. She was paid for results. She was trusted. She was, in a very real sense, a search engine made of memory and gossip. But suppose she found a possible match. The two young people still had to meet, and that was carefully controlled. Forget being alone together. For most of history, courtship happened in plain sight. A young man might be invited to call on a young woman to visit her in her family's parlor. Never alone. A mother, an aunt, a sibling. Someone was always there. The chaperone. Every glance, every word was witnessed. Privacy, as we know it, simply did not exist. And this was no mere etiquette. Before reliable medicine or birth control, a single unwed pregnancy could ruin a woman and her whole family's future. The chaperone wasn't there for manners. She was a bodyguard, protecting the family's entire survival. And in polite society, there were rules, written down like a science. You did not just show up. You left a card, a small printed card with your name, announcing you wished to call. A silver tray of cards by the door told a young woman exactly who was courting her. The whole ritual ran on paper. And when words were too dangerous, couples spoke in objects. A lock of hair, a carved wooden spoon, a pressed flower. These were love tokens, small, secret promises, a way to say I'm yours without ever saying it aloud. And then there was a custom that sounds, to us, completely unbelievable. In parts of colonial America and Wales, a courting couple was sometimes allowed to share a bed for the whole night, fully clothed, often with a wooden board placed between them, sometimes each one sewn into a separate sack. It was called bundling, a chance to talk, to whisper, to fall in love through a long, cold night, while the family slept just feet away. Strange to us, sensible to them. In an unheated house, where else could you talk privately and still behave? But the deepest romance of all traveled by letter. When a couple could barely be alone, ink did what they could not. Words could go where bodies were forbidden. A letter could be read and reread, folded, hidden, kissed, slept beside, carried until the paper went soft. This was the slowest romance imaginable. You wrote, then you waited. Days, sometimes weeks. Every reply was an event. A single envelope could hold a week of hope or break a heart in one line. It demanded literacy, patience, and courage to set down on paper feelings you could never say to a watched face. Whole love affairs lived entirely in handwriting. Two people falling for the words, long before they were ever allowed to be alone. So, when could young people actually meet? Only in the cracks, and always in public. A stolen glance across the pews on Sunday, the village fair, one dance at the harvest festival. The rare night a young man could take a young woman by the hand. That was it. A whole year of longing, compressed into a handful of supervised nights, and the faces of the families in your valley. And then the world cracked wide open, because around 1900, people left the valley for the city. Young women began earning their own wages, and with money came something radical, somewhere to go. Restaurants, dance halls, amusement parks. Courtship escaped the family parlor and stepped out in public. A young man no longer called at her home. He took her out. They called it going on a date. The word started as working-class slang, and it came with a quiet new rule. Now the man pays. For the first time, romance moved into commercial space and became, just a little, a transaction. Then the car gave couples something they'd never had, privacy. And a century later, the phone put the whole village of matchmakers in your pocket. And here's the thing an engineer would notice. Every single one of these systems was solving the exact same problem. Out of millions of possible partners, how do you sort your way down to one? The matchmaker, the chaperone, the dance card, the dating app, they are all the same machine, built for the same search. We didn't invent matching, we just automated the ante. But here's the contradiction worth sitting with. We now have more ways to meet more people than any humans who ever lived. And somehow, finding love feels harder, not easier, than when your only choices were the dozen families in your valley. Maybe that's the quiet lesson. Love always found a way, through chaperones and bundling boards and letters that took a month to arrive. Under the eyes of whole villages, it still got through. Maybe the rules were never the point. Maybe the wanting always was. And there's always another question waiting in the dark. The next one is right there on your screen. Come wonder about it with me. If this made you see love a little differently, subscribe and stay curious. Sleep well. You're a little less in the dark now. I'll see you at the next midnight question.